Pizza time.
Hello and welcome back to the J&Z podcast. My name is Jace Van Ort,
And I'm Zeth Makla.
and today we're going to be talking about Spider-Man 2. Just jumping right into things, we like this one a lot more. Is that right, Zeth?
It holds up in every way, almost, where you have the story that still works, you have the characters that still work great, you still have the visuals that still look fantastic.
That right there, that last statement, is one of the biggest issues I had with the last one, and they completely fixed it. I gave my gripes about the last movie about how the CGI, everything was all blurry and such, and it just did not give a great experience overall. But in this one, I don't know how big the difference in time was between the two movies, but
2 years.
Just 2 years.
Just 2 years.
It could have been a budget thing. It could have just been they knew what they were doing. They got into their rhythm, but it looks so much better. The fights actually take place during the daytime instead of just hiding under the cover of night, and it doesn't hurt to look at anymore. It's a massive plus, and it doesn't take you away anymore. They may not hold up 100% today, but I have very, very few complaints either. So
Yeah, the same goes for me as well. There was a few instances where the CGI, wasn't 100%. You could tell, but it still looked fantastic for its time. There's a scene when Dr. Octavius and Spider-Man, they're fighting on a brick wall or a building, and it's CGI, but the way it's shot and it's angled, it doesn't make it look like a gobbledy mess. So what did you think of the fights?
they are the fights are so much better. If you watch the last one, there's not that many fights, and when they do, they're kind of lackluster compared to what we get today. Green Goblin goes in. The most action you see is like the explosions, and it was interesting, but it wasn't too exciting for the most part. This one actually used the terrain, I feel, a lot better. It wasn't just Peter Parker just throwing hands a little bit with the Green Goblin, just punching a little bit, and then he dies. That's how it happened in the last one. This one, they have a bunch of encounters in different locations that gave things a real interesting twist. Most notably the train. I love the train fight, and I feel like the choreography, the actual amount of fights, and the quality of them was so much higher. And I don't want to focus on Spider-Man 1. I kind of want to review it as its own movie, but on its own, it's still very comparable to movies of today as far as the quality and quantity of fights that actually mean something.
Yeah, the train sequence is definitely probably still one of my favorite comic book movie moments, just because of it keeps going. Right when you think it's about to end, it keeps going and it doesn't stop. And it uses every sort of terrain, like you would say, like the train's coming from the opposite direction. Peter has to dodge those ones, or he gets hit by them. He gets knocked off the train and he has to steer his way through traffic that's underneath the train, and he has to pull himself up. The buildings on the
Doc
side.
Ock, he looks through the window and Doc Ock punches right through the entire train. It's just it was a really, really great moment in the movie, and I just feel that was the peak of the movie. The best part of that sequence, though, is when he has to stop the train. Doc Ock throws that baby into 10th gear. It's charging down the tracks, and Spider-Man has to stop a train going, if you saw it, in excess of 100 miles an hour. Now, if you did, I'm no Matt Pat here, but if you did the math, that is a lot of strength that you have to stop a train with your arms. Almost as much strength as Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson would have to stop an entire helicopter with a link of cars at the end of Hobbs and Shaw. Now, of course, since that was Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, that one was actually a little lackluster for his taste, but
Yeah, that sequence is definitely one of the great moments, especially when you have the moment when he's unmasked in front of people for the first time and people are seeing his identity. But they don't care. They care about the train. He's like, any more bright ideas? He's like, well, I got one. And then when they carry him and Dr. Octavius wants to kill him and all the people are like, you'll have to go through me. That's just a really great moment.
Immediately followed by Doc Ock parting them like the Red Sea. You know, they did absolutely nothing to. They could do absolutely nothing, of course. So, but it was nice. It was nice to see the citizens in New York actually stand up for him for once.
So, what did you think of Dr. Octavius compared to, the previous villain, Green Goblin?
I don't know if he was as personable of a personal to Spider-Man as Harry was, but in terms of actually having a reason to fight, I just don't know. I always found the Green Goblin to be kind of cringy, just in general. But I think that Doc Ock is a better villain overall, and
Mm-hmm.
he's a lot cooler.
Yeah, he's not. I like him because he's not necessarily a villain by his fault. Like technically it is, but at the same time, it's not. You know what I mean?
I mean, to be fair, Norman isn't either. It's kind of like his other side
Mm-hmm.
thing, but
I really like Alfred Molina's performance in this because you make him. You really like him when you first meet him. He's a little bit cocky, so to speak, at first, but he's likable. Then you start to unlike him a little more, but he's still that likable person that you still want to cheer for, even though he's the villain. And
right.
then at the end, when he turns good at that end, I really like that.
I think that was a pretty logical turnaround, and I like what they did in that regard. I think that in general, as a villain, it wasn't just Harry's be evil to be evil because my other side's telling me to be evil.
I really like him as a villain compared to a lot of major day villains compared in comic book movies. I think he's one of the major ones that has stood the test of time. We've had so many lately when it comes to Marvel and DC animated cartoons, feature films, and a lot of the villains. I could probably list them off by name, but I wouldn't be able to tell you really what their motivation was or who they were as a character compared to Dr. Octavius in this film.
I agree. He's up there villain wise. He's no Thanos. You can't really see where he's coming from, but like you said, he's done a lot better than a lot of the modern day villains. You get to see his thought process, you get to see him evolve throughout the film, and you know why he wants it. You get to see him build it. It's not like nowadays where they go and it's already been all set up. Everything's all set up. They just need the computer key or whatever to shut it down. You get to see things escalate directly instead of, like I said, like Black Widow, I think would be a decent comparison because the main villain of it, he has this whole empire. It's already been all set up. It's like a rock solid thing, but now it has to be taken down. But you didn't see him, you didn't care about the villain that much because you barely saw him, and he wasn't that anything special. And that was one of the things I didn't like. They focused a lot more on the other characters. The only thing that even remotely mattered in the movie was her family, I guess. So I feel like compared to villains like that, Doc Ock scores really high in my book.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, did you know that his tentacles, besides like a few scenes, they were all physical objects?
I could tell to an extent, not in a bad way, but they just looked really good, and I'm glad they didn't rely too much on CGI for that because it clearly wasn't up to snuff at the. I didn't notice it for a couple of the few scenes it has, but I feel like it would be a lot more noticeable if they had used it throughout the whole movie.
Mm-hmm.
And they
Yeah.
just waited until it got to the point where it is today, where you actually can make a convincing arm tentacle. I know we're jumping around a bit here, but you mentioned last episode that you didn't care much for Harry. Do you still have a problem with him?
In this movie, I do still because besides like a few good scenes with him in it, I still don't really like him. I think that the acting is pretty good in this sort of in a few scenes when he gets really agitated at Peter when he's drunk and slaps him and walks away. I think that's a really good scene. Another scene is when Octavius delivers Peter to him and he unmasks him. I really think in his like shock, I really think that's a great scene. But other than that, I really don't care for him that much. And it's mostly due to the actor, not the character.
I still am not sure exactly what you don't like about the actor. I don't think he necessarily did anything wrong.
I
Is
just
it
I
is it
I
how
just
he
don't like
looks?
him.
Is it or just you don't like the person?
No, I don't mind him. I just when it comes to Harry in the comics, I hate to say it, but the one in the Amazing Spider-Man 2 I like a lot more.
Okay, okay, that makes sense. In a comparison sense, I haven't seen that in a long, long time.
I mean, it's still not that good because I don't think they've really done a good Harry Osborn on screen, but they need to feel like friends. And even in the first movie, it feels very forced. Their friendship, just their chemistry is not that great. And then in the
Right, they don't do
second,
anything that friends do.
yeah, it's like kind of
Yeah, you felt like you were more friends with Harry, or not than Harry, than Norman than you were with Harry at the time. Harry just felt like a punching bag.
yeah. As much as I don't like Harry in this, I really despise MJ in this movie. I really think that she was the one thing I didn't like about this movie. If I had to take one thing out, it would be the stuff with her. Now, if it wasn't for her, you wouldn't have some of the other things in the story, but at the same time, it's like I really don't care that you're trying to make Peter jealous with J. Jonah Jameson's son, and you're trying to get with him, and you love Peter and stuff. I don't care about that. Even when it's revealed at the end to her that he's Spider-Man, it just doesn't have an impact for me personally.
Yeah, that the whole romance thing has kind of rubbed me the wrong way this entire series so far.
Mm-hmm.
The first movie, obviously, I had a problem with the end scene, and now Peter's telling her every 2 seconds that he's in love with her, even though she's, engaged. And it ultimately leaves, it leaves this guy, at the altar. Like, who does that? Running away at the end there. Like, imagine being to the moon and you still get overshadowed by Spider-Man after all that. Imagine going into space and going on the moon, and that's still not good enough.
Yeah, it's way too back and forth for me.
It's so ridiculous. She, I don't like MJ. I just don't think that
Yeah,
she's not faithful. She's not anything that. It's just a very.
she's not that likable, and she's not as adventurous as she is in the comics. Like in the comics, she would be there kicking butt just as much as Spider-Man, and in this, she's just the damsel in distress. Which,
No, no, no. She grabbed a board and immediately was chucked aside by a Doc Ock. To her credit,
all right, well maybe there was that one scene.
I mean, she didn't do anything. She just got hit, but she at least grabbed the board. But
If I had to, if though I had to choose one thing about this that I really enjoy is that it shows Peter's personal life, and that when he has the midlife crisis and his web shooters don't work anymore, and he retires as Spider-Man shortly. I really like this scene when it's just B.J. Thomas's Raindrops song in the background, and it just shows his daily life. That scene steals the movie for me every time I watch it.
that was a very good scene. The one issue I have is I'm sure I'm in the minority here, but I thought it was kind of ridiculous that he lost his ability to be Spider-Man, at least temporarily. Like, just cause I get it makes sense to me, that it's because of stress and stress affects things. But I think that it just seems like a very convenient way to make him. I I don't know. I'm sure it's a perfectly fine way of doing it. Just for whatever reason, I don't like it, and I wish I was able to articulate it. It just doesn't. It's just not in the ordinary anymore for people to lose their powers in such a way. Maybe Hulk, it worked, but Hulk was never a main character. It was just an interesting way of going about that. I'm not saying it's good or bad. I didn't like it for whatever reason, but I'm sure a lot of people thought it was just fine, and that's fine with me. So,
I enjoyed it because it had a chance to show his personal life more. Like since he didn't have his web shooters anymore, he had to fix a bike up. When you're Spider-Man, you could go wherever just as fast in the car, but he had to have a bike. And then he's doing better in school. He has to wear his glasses now. He's tripping over himself. He's One of my favorite parts is when he sees the police go by and he just stands there eating a hot dog and then he just walks away.
I did like that part, and I especially liked. I enjoyed that they showed him not being Spider-Man for a bit. That guy has to be like the most well-timed person in history in order to have you believe that. Like every conceivable crime comes by him as he's not Spider-Man. He'll just be walking down the street. There's like an entire gunfight, police chase, burning buildings. All this stuff is happening. You
Well,
know,
remember Peter Parker's supposed to like take notice of that more, so you would notice that a little more with his character compared to the Avengers, who they work with the more bigger things. Spider-Man, he's, the more down to earth character who he would help in a firefight or, a simple police chase.
oh, I know. I just found it funny the amount of things that just happen
Oh,
around him
okay.
on a daily basis. Yeah, as I was saying earlier though, one complaint we had last time is now mitigated. He actually has financial problems in this movie,
Mm-hmm.
and they're pretty severe. It's always looming over him. Having to deal with the apartment. Aunt May's going through some tough times. He lost his job. First thing he did in the movie was lose his job. So it was very effective at showing that he was going through a lot of stress.
Mr. Ditkovitsky. It's like it's
Oh, the apartment guy?
yeah, it's the apartment guy. It's a hard name to pronounce, but uh, his lines always crack me up. He's like rent.
Oh, what did he say that was kind of mean to about his like if I had a cracker time I every time I heard what did he say?
Well, his daughter's like skinny as a rail, so I think he says if I had a cracker every time somebody said that, she would be fit. Another one of my favorite moments is when he tries to get into Mary Jane's show, and it's Bruce Campbell's second appearance, and was he French in this one, or is that the other one?
I have no idea.
I know he had an accent in this one, but he was like, "You can't enter this because it started." So that one always cracked me
Well,
up.
he was like, "Hey, your shoelaces." He ties his shoes, your tie, and he fixes his tie. Oh, sorry, you can't come in.
That and the other part when Spider-Man's in the elevator and they're just talking, rides up in the crotch a little bit.
That was. I like seeing those more personable moments, like in the MCU. They happen, but they always feel like it's a comedy sketch when it happens. This just felt like it just felt a lot more natural. You know what I'm saying? Like it's a Marvel movie, so they always have like this witty lines, and I'm not saying this didn't, but it felt a lot more awkward than the MCU would ever have it. It just had the whole movie, I feel, had a really interesting feel to it that you don't see nowadays. I like Marvel movies, I really do, but they all feel a certain way, and this feels a different way. Don't know what exactly it is, but
Well, like I stated before from last week's, it's Sam Raimi's. Um,
style.
yeah, it's his style of humor. It's his style of camera work. It's his style of dialogue, and it's all cheesy. It's meant to kind of feel
It's cheesy but
like a
fun.
radio show almost.
I agree. There's just a lot to like with his style
Yeah,
of
his style
editing and
definitely came full front. Uh, I don't know if you know this, but he is a horror director. His work was originally in horror. So one of his scenes that really came to prevalent with that was the hospital room scene when Dr. Octavius and they're trying to operate on the arms and take them off and they go crazy.
yeah, I will say one thing that got a bit distracting throughout the entire movie was the amount of women screaming.
Oh
It
yeah.
was just near constant, and they like they do the cringy thing where they just like zoom in on their face as they're doing it. Just the generic thing. Wasn't a huge fan of that. That could have happened a lot less, but it just really comes to light in that hospital scene.
Yeah, but I still really enjoy that scene. I think that's one of the best.
I like the Aunt May part, and
Oh yeah.
especially when he throws her up and she just gently grabs onto her umbrella, even though
Oh,
defying all logic and gravity. And
I thought you were talking about the other scene when Peter confronts her and says that it's his fault.
oh, that's actually a really good scene.
Yeah, when because what I like about it is she's not forgiveful right away. It's more of how someone would naturally react to if you were responsible for someone's death, so to speak, and in some way, you'd be taken aback almost like she is, and kind of just not say anything. So I really like that scene because uh, it really plays into her acting strengths of her face, because she doesn't say anything right when he says it, I think, and she just turns white and pale and then just walks away.
Right, right. It's not instant forgiveness. She has to take her time and cope with it. It's a while before we get back to her.
Mm-hmm.
And that was just a really impactful scene. I like that scene a lot. Not because it's necessarily like fun to watch, but it gives meaning to his actions. It lets him say what he's been trying to say since the first movie. And it's a lot more impactful than anything he's ever said to MJ.
So your overall thoughts on this one?
I think this one's a ton better than the first movie. It's there's not that many Spider-Man films, and while it's not my favorite Spider-Man, it's probably going to end up being in my top couple, only cuz I know that there's only so many left. And yeah, I really really liked it. How about you, Seth?
Yeah, I mean, I still heavily enjoy this. I remember uh, growing up watching this. This is what kind of got me into music a little more. That song with raindrops keep falling on my head. That's what really got me into music. When I listened to that when I was like 8, when I first saw it, that's when I asked my dad. I was like, "What's that song?" And that's when I slowly got into music. So this one is a little nostalgic for me more than the first one, but I really enjoy it because everything about this still holds up with the story, with the characters, with the acting. A lot of the scenes are still really good. A lot of the action is still really good. So yeah, this is definitely still one of my favorite comic book movies, and I think it's one of the top Spider-Man movies still. So with this being, the final episode of this year, what are you looking forward to next year with 2022 coming up, as in terms of, movies, video games?
I'm looking forward to, on the movie front, I have to think about that. But on the game front, I am looking forward to Horizon Forbidden West coming out, I think sometime next year. That is going to
Mm-hmm.
be a masterpiece of a game, and I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to that as well, with Breath of the Wild 2 coming out.
Mm.
And then you have, the Uncharted movie, you have all the Marvel movies coming out, as well as a ton of Disney Plus shows and Star Wars to keep up with. So we're definitely going to have a lot of content to keep up with.
No shortage of goodies coming out next year.
Mm-mm.
Alrighty, with that being said, thanks again for watching, guys. We've had a great year so far, and we're looking forward to the next one where we'll be starting season 2. Thanks for sticking with us. If you want, you can like, comment, subscribe, and we'll be seeing you next year.
See you guys.